I never thought at 63 years old I would find myself standing in an empty art studio at midnight, staring at a painting that could destroy my entire family, while the man who created this chaos slept peacefully in my guest room upstairs. But here I am, and I need to tell someone what happened before I lose my mind completely. My name is Margaret, and until 6 months ago, I was living what everyone considered a perfect life in suburban Portland, Oregon. Married for 38 years to Robert, a retired accountant who spent his days golfing and his evenings watching documentaries. 2 grown daughters, Emily and Charlotte, both successful, both married, both living their own lives in Seattle and San Francisco. I taught art classes at the community center 3 times a week, painted in my studio, attended book club on Thursdays, and volunteered at the local animal shelter on weekends. Perfect, predictable, comfortable, and absolutely suffocating. The suffocation started so gradually I didn't even notice it at first. Robert and I had become roommates somewhere along the way. 2 people sharing a space, but not a life. We hadn't touched each other with any real intention in years. Our conversations revolved around grocery lists, doctor appointments, and what to watch on television. My daughters called dutifully every Sunday, talked about their own lives, asked surface-level questions about mine, and hung up feeling they'd fulfilled their obligation. Nobody asked if I was happy. Nobody asked what I dreamed about. Nobody saw me as anything more than mom, or wife, or Mrs. Patterson, the art teacher. And then Daniel walked into my Tuesday morning watercolor class. He was 39 years old, recently divorced, new to Portland after taking a job as a physical therapist at the hospital downtown. He told me later that his therapist had suggested he find a creative outlet to process his divorce, something to help him reconnect with himself. He chose painting because he'd always wanted to try it but never had the time. When he smiled at me that first day, asking which brushes he should buy, something inside my chest cracked open. Not in a romantic way, not at first. It was more like suddenly remembering I was alive. Daniel was terrible at watercolors. Absolutely awful. His flowers looked like muddy puddles, his landscapes like abstract disasters. But he kept coming back, week after week, staying after class to ask questions, to try again, to improve. And I kept staying late to help him, because when I was showing him how to blend colors or create depth, I felt like myself again. Not someone's wife or mother or the lady who teaches painting to retirees. Just Margaret, a woman who loved art and could share that love with someone who genuinely wanted to learn. If you're watching this and you've ever felt invisible in your own life, please hit that subscribe button. I need to know I'm not alone in this. I need to know someone understands. The friendship developed slowly, innocently. We'd talk about art, about life, about his divorce, and how it felt to start over at almost 40. I never talked about my marriage, not really, but I think he could sense the loneliness in me. After 2 months, he asked if I did private lessons. Robert was going on a golf trip to Arizona with his buddies for 10 days, and Daniel wanted to really focus on improving. I said yes without thinking about what it might mean. Those private lessons changed everything. 3 times a week, Daniel would come to my home studio in the evenings. We'd paint for 2 hours, but we'd talk for 3. He told me about his ex-wife, how she'd said he was too sensitive, too emotional, too present, how she'd wanted someone who would work long hours and not ask her how she was feeling, how he'd tried to become that person and lost himself in the process. I told him things I'd never said out loud to anyone, about how I'd spent my entire adult life being what everyone needed me to be, and how somewhere along the way I'd forgotten what I needed for myself. The night it happened, we'd been working on a portrait together, not of anyone specific, just a face that came from our combined imagination. He was behind me, watching me add shadows to the cheekbones, and I was explaining the technique when I felt his hand rest gently on my shoulder. Not inappropriately, not aggressively, just there. I froze. My entire body went electric with that simple touch because Robert hadn't touched me like that, with attention and intention, in years. I should have moved away. I should have said something about professional boundaries. I should have remembered my wedding vows and my daughters and my reputation in the community. But instead, I turned around, and when I looked into Daniel's eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen in decades. Someone who saw me. Really saw me. Not as a role I played, but as a woman with desires and dreams and a whole inner life that had been locked away for so long, I'd almost forgotten it existed. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel because what happens next is going to shock you, and you'll want to know how this story ends. He kissed me in front of that painting, soft, tentative, asking permission even as it was happening. And God help me, I kissed him back. Not just kissed him, but poured 38 years of loneliness and invisibility and suffocation into that kiss. When we finally pulled apart, I was crying, and he was holding my face in his hands like I was something precious, something worth careful handling. We didn't do anything more that night, despite what you might be thinking. We just stood there in my studio, foreheads pressed together, both of us knowing we'd crossed a line, but neither of us willing to step back over it. The guilt hit me the moment he left. I sat in my studio until 3 a.m, staring at that portrait we'd painted together, wondering what kind of person I'd become. I was a grandmother, for God's sake. My daughter Emily had just announced she was pregnant with her first child. I was supposed to be knitting booties and picking out nursery colors, not having feelings for a man young enough to be my son. But the guilt was tangled up with something else, something dangerous. I felt alive for the first time in years. Robert came home from Arizona tan and happy, full of stories about hole-in-ones and resort restaurants. He didn't notice anything different about me. Why would he? He hadn't really looked at me in years. I threw myself into being the perfect wife, cooking his favorite meals, asking about his golf game, initiating conversations about maybe taking a trip together. He was pleased but confused, like a dog who suddenly gets an extra treat for no reason. It broke my heart a little, realizing how low our bar had become. Daniel texted me the day after Robert got home. I can't stop thinking about you. I stared at those words for an hour before responding. We can't do this. His reply came immediately. I know, but I had to tell you the truth. And then, a minute later, you deserve to be seen, Margaret. You deserve to be chosen. I cried reading those words because nobody had chosen me in so long. Robert had married me because I was suitable, because we got along, because it was what you did at 25. My daughters loved me because I was their mother, because I'd sacrificed everything to raise them, because it was expected. But Daniel was choosing me. Specifically me, for no reason other than he wanted to. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. If this story is resonating with you, please subscribe. These next parts get so much more complicated, and I promise you've never heard anything like what happened next. I tried to stay away from Daniel. I really did. I told him we couldn't see each other anymore, not even for lessons. He said he understood, said he'd respect my marriage, said he'd leave me alone if that's what I really wanted. But then he added, but is it what you want? Or is it what you think you're supposed to want? That question haunted me for days. What did I want? I was 63 years old, and I genuinely didn't know the answer. The affair, if you can call it that, began in earnest 2 weeks later. Not physically, not at first, but emotionally, I was completely unfaithful to Robert. Daniel and I started meeting at a coffee shop in a different part of town, somewhere nobody we knew would see us. We'd sit for hours talking about everything and nothing. Art, philosophy, our childhoods, our regrets, our secret dreams. He told me he wanted to start his own practice, maybe combine physical therapy with art therapy. I told him I'd always wanted to have a real gallery showing of my work, but was too afraid of rejection to try. He encouraged me. He believed in me. He made me believe in myself. The physical part started on a rainy afternoon in early November. We'd met at his apartment because the coffee shop was closed for renovations. I told myself we were just going to look at his latest paintings, that we were friends, that I could control this. But the moment I walked through his door, we both knew why I was really there. This time when he kissed me, there was no hesitation from either of us. I won't describe what happened next in detail, not because I'm ashamed, though God knows I should be, but because even now, even with everything that's happened since, those moments feel sacred somehow. For 3 hours, I wasn't a wife or a mother or a teacher. I was just Margaret, a woman being touched with reverence and desire, being told she was beautiful, being made to feel like she mattered. The guilt afterwards was crushing. I went home and took a shower so long that Robert knocked on the bathroom door asking if I was okay. I said I'd gotten caught in the rain and couldn't get warm. Another lie to add to the growing pile. That night, lying next to Robert while he snored peacefully, I made a decision. I would end it with Daniel. I would confess to Robert, not about the physical affair, but about the emotional distance, about how we'd grown apart. We'd go to counseling. We'd fix this. I would do the right thing. But at 63, you'd think I'd have learned that the right thing is rarely the easy thing, and sometimes what seems like the right thing isn't right at all. Please subscribe if you want to see how this situation completely explodes, because what happens in the next few weeks will shock you. I never got the chance to confess or end it because Charlotte showed up unannounced the next weekend. My younger daughter, the one who always had a sixth sense for when something was wrong, appeared on my doorstep with wine and takeout, saying she just wanted a girls' weekend with her mom. I should have been happy, but all I felt was panic. Charlotte has always been perceptive, the one who notices when I've cut my hair or changed my lipstick, who asks follow-up questions about things I mentioned in passing 3 weeks ago. That Saturday afternoon, she was showing me photos on her phone from a recent work conference when a text from Daniel came through. My phone was on the coffee table between us, the screen lit up with his name and the preview of his message. Still thinking about Thursday, you're incredible. Charlotte saw it. I watched her face change, confusion giving way to suspicion, giving way to something harder. Mom, who's Daniel? She asked, her voice carefully neutral. I tried to play it off. A student, I said. He was thanking me for extra help with a difficult technique, but Charlotte isn't stupid and I'm not a good liar. She picked up my phone and asked, "Can I see?" And what could I say? I grabbed the phone and that grab told her everything. She stood up, her face pale, and asked in a voice I barely recognized, "Are you having an affair?" The word hung in the air between us like a bomb about to explode. I wanted to deny it, but what came out instead was, "It's not what you think." Which, of course, is exactly what people say when it is what you think. Charlotte started crying, not loud sobbing, but quiet tears that somehow hurt more. "How could you?" she whispered. "Dad's upstairs watching football. Dad, who's been faithful to you for almost 40 years. How could you do this to him? To us?" I tried to explain. God help me, I tried. I told her about the loneliness, about feeling invisible, about how I'd lost myself somewhere along the way. But even as the words came out, I heard how selfish they sounded. Charlotte listened, her face getting harder with every word. When I finished, she said something I'll never forget. "You're not special, Mom. Every married person feels lonely sometimes. Every woman feels invisible at some point. But we don't all betray our families. We don't all throw away decades of marriage because some guy made us feel good for 5 minutes. Keep that subscribe button pressed because this situation is about to get so much worse than you can imagine." She gave me an ultimatum. End it with Daniel immediately and tell Robert everything, or she would. She gave me 1 week. 7 days to blow up my entire life or watch her do it for me. After she left, I sat in my studio and stared at that portrait Daniel and I had painted together. The face looked like it was judging me, disappointed in what I'd become. I met Daniel the next day and told him everything. I expected him to be angry or hurt that I was ending it, but instead, he just looked sad. "I understand," he said. "I knew this couldn't last. People like me don't get to keep people like you." I asked what he meant, and he said, "You have a whole life, Margaret. A family, a history, a place in the world. I'm just a divorced guy starting over. Of course you're going to choose them over me." But then he took my hand and said, "But I need you to know something. This wasn't just an affair for me. I'm in love with you. Completely, terrifyingly in love with you. And I think you love me too, even if you can't admit it." He was right, and that's what made everything so impossibly hard. I did love him. Not just the attention or the desire or the way he made me feel alive. I loved him, his kindness and his creativity and his earnestness, the way he cried at sad movies and got excited about color theory, and listened when I talked like every word mattered. At 63, I had fallen completely, devastatingly in love with a man who wasn't my husband, and it was going to destroy everything. I went home that night planning to confess everything to Robert. I practiced the words in my head. "I've betrayed you. I've been seeing someone else. I'm so sorry. But when I walked in, Robert was in the kitchen making dinner, something he rarely did, humming along to the radio. He turned when he heard me and smiled, actually smiled, and said, "I thought we could have a nice dinner together, just us. It feels like we haven't really talked in a while." And my courage evaporated. I couldn't do it. I couldn't destroy this kind, decent man who'd never hurt me, who'd just been living his life not knowing he was supposed to be something more. Make sure you're subscribed because what happens next will change everything, and the revelation is coming that nobody saw coming. The week Charlotte gave me passed in a blur of anxiety and indecision. I ended things with Daniel, told him we couldn't see each other or speak anymore. He accepted it with grace but sent me one final text. "I'll wait for you. However long it takes, I'll wait, because you're worth waiting for." I blocked his number, because I knew if I didn't, I'd text him back. But I didn't confess to Robert. I told myself I would, that I was just waiting for the right moment, but the truth was, I was a coward. On day 7, Charlotte called and asked me to meet her for lunch. "No, Dad," she said. "Just us." I knew what was coming. She was going to tell me she'd given me enough time, that she was going to tell Robert herself if I didn't. I went to that lunch prepared to finally do the right thing, to tell her I'd confessed to Robert that evening, to accept the consequences of my actions. But when I got to the restaurant, Charlotte wasn't alone. Sitting next to her was Emily, my older daughter, who was supposed to be in Seattle, and across from them was Daniel's ex-wife, Nicole. My entire body went cold. Charlotte saw my face and said quietly, "Sit down, Mom. We need to talk." This is where everything I thought I knew shattered into a million pieces. Nicole looked at me with something between pity and anger. "Did he tell you he was divorced?" she asked. I nodded, unable to speak. She laughed, bitter and sharp. "We're not divorced. We're separated. Have been for 8 months, because I found out he's done this before. 3 times. Always with his clients or students or someone vulnerable. Always someone older. Always someone married. He has a type. Successful, lonely women who think they're invisible. He makes them feel seen, makes them fall in love with him, and then when things get too complicated or the money runs out, he disappears." The restaurant spun around me. "Money?" I managed to whisper. Nicole pulled out her phone and showed me bank statements. "Did you give him money, Margaret? For his new practice? For art supplies? For rent?" And oh God, I had. Over the past month, Daniel had mentioned financial troubles. The divorce was expensive, he'd said. His car needed repairs. His landlord raised the rent. I'd given him $3,000 total, in small amounts, so I wouldn't have to explain to Robert where the money went. Money I told myself was helping someone I cared about, but which I now saw was just part of a script he'd performed before. If you're not subscribed yet, please do it now because this story is far from over, and what I discovered next will absolutely destroy you. Emily was crying. "Mom, how could you fall for this? How could you not see what he was doing?" But I hadn't seen it because I hadn't wanted to. I'd been so hungry for attention, so desperate to feel alive, that I'd walked right into a trap. Charlotte showed me articles Nicole had found, blog posts from 2 of Daniel's previous victims, women who'd shared their stories online. The details were eerily similar to mine. The slow friendship, the emotional connection, the revelation that they were seen and understood, the physical affair, the promises, the requests for money. One woman had left her husband. Another had been driven to therapy after Daniel ghosted her when she couldn't give him any more money. I excused myself to the bathroom and vomited. When I came back, Nicole said something that will haunt me forever. "I'm not telling you this to hurt you, though God knows you deserve it for sleeping with my husband. I'm telling you because you have daughters, and they deserve to know what kind of man was in their mother's life. And because maybe if enough of us speak up, we can stop him from doing this to someone else." The lunch ended with Charlotte telling me she hadn't told Robert yet, because she wanted me to understand the full extent of what I'd done first. "You didn't just cheat on Dad," she said. "You fell for a con artist. You risked our family, your reputation, everything, for a man who was playing you from the start. How are you going to explain that to Dad? How are you going to live with yourself?" I had no answer because I didn't know. I went home that afternoon and sat in my studio, staring at that portrait again. The face we'd painted together now looked like a stranger, someone I'd never really known at all. I texted Daniel from a different number. "I know everything. Don't ever contact me or my family again." He didn't respond. That night, I told Robert everything. Not because I wanted to, but because I knew Charlotte was right. I owed him the truth. We sat in our bedroom, the room where we'd shared 38 years of marriage, and I confessed. The friendship, the affair, the money, the con. I watched his face change as I talked. Watched him go from confused to hurt to angry to something worse, disappointed. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I don't know who you are." Please stay subscribed because the aftermath of this revelation is going to take turns you cannot predict. Robert moved into the guest room that night. We haven't slept in the same room since. Emily stopped speaking to me entirely. She's pregnant with my first grandchild, and I don't know if I'll ever be allowed to meet them. Charlotte speaks to me, but it's cold and functional. Robert hasn't decided about divorce yet. He's seeing a therapist, trying to process everything. My daughters have asked him to leave me, told him he deserves better. And he does. He absolutely does. But here's where the story gets even more complicated, and I need you to understand why I'm telling you all of this. 3 weeks after that catastrophic lunch, I got a package in the mail. No return address, just my name. Inside was the portrait Daniel and I had painted together. He must have taken it from my studio at some point. And there was a note, handwritten. "This was real, even if everything else wasn't. You're still the most extraordinary woman I've ever met. I'm sorry I couldn't be who you needed me to be. I hope you find your way back to yourself. D." I should have thrown it away. I should have burned it, but I didn't. I hung it in my studio, and now I sit here staring at it every day, trying to understand what was real and what was performance. Because here's the thing nobody wants to acknowledge. Even though Daniel was a con artist, even though he manipulated me and lied to me and used me, the feelings I had were real. The loneliness that drove me to him was real. The invisibility I felt in my marriage was real. The desire to be seen and chosen and valued as more than just a role I played was real. And now I'm left with an impossible question. If the affair was fake but the feelings were real, and the marriage is real but the feelings have faded, what does that make me? What do I choose? Subscribe and comment below because I genuinely need your perspective on what comes next. Robert has started making an effort. He asks me about my day. He touches my shoulder when he passes me in the kitchen. He suggested couples counseling. He's trying to be the husband I needed him to be. But I can't tell if it's too late or if I'm just too broken to receive it. My daughters watch us like hawks, waiting to see if I'll betray him again, waiting for proof that I'm the villain they now believe me to be. I'm still teaching my art classes, though everyone looks at me differently now. Small towns talk, and somehow word got around. I'm the grandmother who had an affair with a younger man. I'm the cautionary tale. I'm the proof that you can't trust anyone. Some students stopped coming to my classes, others stayed but treat me with a cold politeness that hurts worse than outright hostility. Last week, I got a message from one of Daniel's previous victims. She found me through Nicole. She wanted me to know that she'd pressed charges against him for fraud, and she asked if I wanted to add my name to the complaint. I said I'd think about it. Part of me wants justice, wants him to face consequences for what he did to me and to the other women. But another part of me knows that pressing charges means making everything public, means more shame for my family, means Emily and Charlotte will have to see their mother in the news as a victim of a con artist. And here's the secret I haven't told anyone. The secret that makes me wonder if I'm losing my mind. I miss him. Not the real Daniel, not the con artist who stole money and broke hearts, but the version of him I thought I knew. I miss feeling seen. I miss the conversations and the way he looked at me like I mattered. I miss feeling alive, even if it was all a lie. Is that crazy? Is that proof that I'm damaged beyond repair? Or is it just proof that I'm human? And that 63 years of being what everyone needed me to be has left me so starved for authenticity that I'm still clinging to crumbs of what I thought was real? Make sure you're subscribed because I need you to help me answer the question I'm about to ask. Last night, Robert came to my studio and saw the portrait hanging on the wall. He stood there for a long time, just looking at it. Then he said, "That's good work, Margaret. Really good. I never knew you could paint like that." And I realized that in 38 years of marriage, Robert had rarely come to my studio. He'd never really looked at my art. He supported it in the abstract, was proud when I had small successes, but he'd never actually engaged with it. Never asked me about my techniques or my inspirations or what painting meant to me. "I'm sorry," he said suddenly, "for not seeing you, for letting us become strangers. You were right to feel invisible because I made you invisible. I got comfortable, and I stopped trying, and I took you for granted. What Daniel did was wrong, and what you did was wrong. But I wasn't blameless in creating the circumstances that made you vulnerable to him." I started crying because those were words I'd needed to hear for so long. And then Robert said something that's been echoing in my head ever since. "I want to try to fix this. I want to get to know you again, the real you that I've been ignoring for years. But you have to decide if that's what you want too. If you can forgive me for my neglect, the way I'm trying to forgive you for your betrayal. If you think there's anything worth saving here, or if it's too late. And that's the question I'm asking you now, everyone watching this. Is it too late? Can a marriage survive both parties failing each other in fundamental ways? Can you rebuild something that's been broken and built on a foundation that was cracked from the start? My daughters want me to choose Robert, to commit to fixing the marriage, to prove that I'm not the selfish monster they think I am. Robert says he wants me to choose him too, but only if it's real. Only if I'm not just staying out of guilt or obligation. And somewhere in the back of my mind, there's a voice saying maybe I shouldn't choose either of them. Maybe at 63, I should choose myself for the first time in my life. But what does that even mean? Leaving Robert, losing my daughter's respect completely, being alone in a town that already judges me, starting over at 63 with nothing but a studio full of paintings and a heart full of confusion. Is that bravery, or is that just selfishness wearing a different mask? Please comment below and tell me what you would do in my place. Would you stay and try to rebuild with Robert? Would you leave and start fresh? Would you press charges against Daniel or let it go? Would you hang on to a portrait of a man who lied to you, or would you burn it and try to forget? I sit in my studio every night now, staring at that face we painted together, trying to figure out which parts of this disaster were his fault, which parts were mine, and which parts were just the inevitable result of two people who'd forgotten how to be in love, trying to build a life together anyway. I'm 63 years old, and I'm more lost than I've ever been. I broke somewhere along the way. Maybe in that first kiss. Maybe years before when I stopped believing I was more than a role. And I don't know how to put myself back together, or even if I should try. So I'm asking you, please, if you've made it this far in my story, what would you do in my place? Because I genuinely don't know the answer anymore. And maybe that's the most honest thing I've said this entire time. Subscribe, comment, and let me know. I'll be reading every single one, trying to find clarity in the chaos. What would you do if you were me?